Take a deep breath and let your body rest. Feel your shoulders begin to sink, your face soften, and your thoughts slow, like leaves drifting down into a still moonlit pond. It is the year 1291. His bed is a rough sack filled with straw, shared with his younger brother, who mutters her hands move without thought as they have every morning for years, shaping the bread that will feed the family before the sun reaches the top of the sky. The mud path is still quiet, except for the occasional shuffle of footsteps other boys, other girls, all around his age, beginning the same motions, the same routine. Elric's first task is to carry 2 wooden buckets to the well. The path there is familiar, worn down by hundreds of feet over time. He knows where the stones are slick, where the weeds grow high. Only the sun, crawling across the sky like a slow golden hand, and the rhythm of work. The fence posts are warped from the rain. Elric helps realign them, drives iron nails into cracked wood, and hauls fresh bundles of hay to patch the holes. His fingers sting from splinters. His palms burn with blisters. And yet there is no praise, only a nod from his father and the next task. There's always a next task. He walks in silence, listening to the squelch of his footsteps, the creak of the yoke balanced across his shoulders, the way the air changes as the sun begins to rise through the mist. He sits under the shadow of a tree, chewing dried apple slices and letting his legs rest. In the distance he sees the abbey bells swing, once marking the hour of midday prayer. A few of the older villagers kneel and whisper their devotion. Elric stays seated, watching the clouds drift behind the chapel spire. He wonders what it would feel like to be one of the monks inside cloistered, silent, clean. He wonders if they get bored, or if they sleep better on stone than he does on straw. She does not speak. Elric doesn't expect her to. Morning is not for talking, it's for working. Its dirty, rhythmic work-beating stalks against a wide wooden frame to loosen the kernels from the husks. Dust rises in clouds, catching the light like drifting ghosts. He breathes through his sleeve. He wipes his eyes often. By the end of the task, his arms are trembling again. But the pile of chaff is smaller. The work has been done. He pulls on his tunic, the same one he's worn all week, stained at the hem and slightly too short in the sleeves. Elric walks home beneath a sky turning amber, the yoke across his shoulders again, this time loaded with kindling. His hands are raw. The stew smells stronger carrots and something that might be meat. His siblings are already inside, crouched by the hearth. He joins them, settling beside the coals as his mother ladles out the bowls. The heat feels good against his skin. He closes his eyes for a moment. No thoughts, just warmth. Just the sound of the ladle scraping the pot. His stomach aches. His feet are numb. But he walks with calm. This is his life. This is what it means to be his age in this time. No choices. Just rhythms. Just surviving. Then his belt. Then the worn leather shoes that once belonged to his cousin, with the holes patched by waxed thread and careful fingers, and turns over beside him, still wrapped in the warmth of a tattered wool blanket. The cottage is dim, the only light coming from a thin crack between the wooden shutters. She's 14, tall, with hair braided tightly down her back. Elric eats quickly, seated on a wooden bench beside his siblings. The warmth of the broth soothes his throat, still rough from the cold night air. No one lingers at the table. There is no time for leisure. By the time the bowl is empty, his father is already calling again, this time from the edge of the field. where a new row of fencing needs repair. Elric grabs the small hammer and follows. They don't say much, just nods of recognition, soft movements, shared glances. Words aren't necessary. Their hands are busy lowering buckets, winding rope, lifting the water that they will carry back without spilling a drop. The buckets are heavy. Elric's arms strain as he adjusts the yoke again and starts the slow walk home. His shoulders already ache, and the day hasn't even begun. The floor is cold. The air smells like smoke, old cheese, and sheep wool. There is no fireplace, just a shallow stone pit where last night's coals still glow faintly. Elric rubs his hands together and kneels beside it, feeding the embers with thin twigs until the first curl of flame returns, licking upward like a whisper. The air is damp with early morning dew, and a veil of pale mist hangs over the thatched rooftops, making them look like sleeping beasts crouched in the mud. Somewhere in the trees a bird begins its call, high and whistling, echoing across the fields. Inside a cottage made of timber and packed earth, a teenager named Elric stirs from sleep, not because he wants to, but because his father's voice calls out in that familiar low rumble that means it is time to rise. He's 13, though no one counts birthdays here. There is no cake, no candle, no phone filled with messages. Just a new day, just like the last, just like the one before it. Let go of today. Let go of screens and sirens, errands and expectations. In this moment, nothing is required of you. Nothing is chasing you. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to wander into another time, where the pace is slower, the air smells of soil and wood smoke, and every sound is soft. A wooden bucket filling with water, the shuffle of straw beneath your feet, a far-off bell. Let your mind follow the quiet into this other world, into a time without clocks or noise, a time before comfort was ordinary, before childhood had much room to breathe. Our story today begins just before sunrise in a small, medieval village nestled between the rolling hills of what would someday be called Burgundy. Elric sits up slowly, scratching at his scalp and blinking the sleep from his eyes. His mother is already awake, kneading dough with quiet determination at the wooden table. Outside, the village is beginning to wake. Chickens squawk from their coop beside the granary, and smoke rises in delicate ribbons from a dozen chimneys. At the well he meets Beatrice, the miller's daughter. Breakfast is plain, crusted barley bread, and a thin broth made from yesterday's onions and turnip peel. And so the day begins. There are no breaks, no moments to scroll, no notifications. By midday, the sun is high and warm on his back. When the break ends, it's time to help his older cousin thresh the grain. Evening returns slowly, with long shadows stretching across the fields, and the first calls of night birds in the trees. The cottage is warm with firelight now, and outside the village quiets once more, like a breath held in stillness. The stew is thin, but warm. Elric holds the wooden bowl in both hands, watching the steam curl into the air like a soft ribbon. The cottage is quiet except for the occasional creak of the rafters and the sound of the fire shifting in its stone cradle. No one speaks much at supper. Words are for work or worship, not for meals. He chews slowly, counting each bite, letting the heat from the food ease the tightness in his jaw. His mother hums under her breath while the younger children doze, and his father picks absently at a crack in the table that's been there since Elric can remember. Outside, the sky has gone deep blue, the kind of blue that feels heavy. the kind of blue that settles on rooftops and trees like a soft velvet cloth. Another day is done. After supper, there is no lounging, no games, no idle time. Elric is sent to the goat pen with a torch stub and a small sack of feed. The animals bleat softly in the dark, their eyes catching the firelight like silver beads. He checks the fence, tightens the gate latch, and crouches beside the largest goat as it presses its head gently into his side. The straw is damp again. He will need to muck it out in the morning. He scratches the goat's ears, listens to it chew, and then rises slowly. His back pops. His knees crack. He is only 13, but he feels older already. He returns inside to the scent of fresh herbs drying near the hearth. His mother has strung bunches of sage and lavender from the rafters again. They sway gently in the heat, their fragrance faint but soothing. It reminds him of his grandmother, who died the year before last. She had hands like old bark and a voice that could calm even the wildest dogs. He still dreams about her sometimes, still hears her singing when the wind blows just right. There is no bed to retreat to, no door to close. The cottage is one room, and privacy doesn't exist. Elric lays his blanket by the fire and watches the flame flicker low. The smoke curls upward, tracing old stories in the air. His brother rolls toward him in his sleep and mutters nonsense. Elric chuckles softly. He lies back, eyes fixed on the wooden beams above, worn smooth by years of rising heat and sleeping breath. The world is still. The fire whispers, and his limbs, aching and tired, begin to loosen. Sleep doesn't come quickly, but it comes. Not with dreams of fantasy or escape, but with the feeling of earth beneath him, warmth near his skin, and a day completed. His final thought before drifting off is of Beatrice again, how she smiled once when the rooster slipped in the mud, and how she didn't laugh, just smiled. That smile follows him into the dark like a lantern. Morning returns with a rooster's cry and the scrape of a wooden door opening across the village. Elric wakes before the sun is fully risen, the sky still a soft, colorless gray. He stretches, feeling the stiffness in his back from the hard floor, and pulls on his tunic with one hand while rubbing the sleep from his eyes with the other. His father has already left to mend a broken gate at the church pasture. Elric is to help the carpenter today. He is glad he prefers working with wood to fields. There is something calming about the rhythm of shaping a beam, fitting things together. It's precise, predictable. He eats a crust of bread and drinks cold water from a clay jug before heading out, passing by the chapel where an old monk is sweeping the steps with a bundle of dried reeds. The monk nods. Elric nods back. Words are not needed. The carpenter's shed smells like sawdust, resin, and burnt oil. It is one of the few places in the village that feels alive in its own quiet way. The walls are lined with tools carefully placed, each with its purpose. Today they are making a new table for the priest. Elric watches, listens, learns. He is handed a plane, shown the angle, the pressure. His hands tremble at first, but soon the motion becomes familiar. Shave, lift, breathe. Wood curls fall like soft feathers to the ground. There is peace in the pattern, peace in the silence. When they break for food, Elric is given a piece of salted cheese and a slice of soft rye bread. He eats slowly, sitting on a block of wood beside the open door, watching birds hop along the edge of a stone wall outside. He wonders what it would be like to fly to leave the mud and smoke and walk across the clouds. But then the bell rings again, and the moment is gone. They finish the table by late afternoon. Elric helps carry it to the chapel, his shoulder pressed against the smooth underside, the scent of pine clinging to his hands. The priest thanks them with a nod and a quiet blessing. Elric bows his head. He doesn't believe in all of it, not yet. But the words are warm, and that is enough. As the sun begins to fall again, Elric returns home with a bundle of wood scraps and the sharp set of shavings in his clothes. His mother greets him with a glance and a pat on the back. She is stirring something in the pot. His sister is threading beads into a piece of cloth. His youngest brother is asleep on the floor, thumb tucked under his chin. Elric sits by the fire again, crosses his legs, and watches the light dance across the walls. Another day, another rhythm, and somewhere beyond the trees the sky fades to stars. The stars above the village seem especially bright tonight. There are no city lights to dull their glow, no buzz of electricity to compete with the quiet. Just constellations scattered across a sky so black and deep feels like a still pond reflecting something infinite. It's milking day, and the cows are restless. The cream will rise by evening, and should churn it with the paddle until her shoulders ache. The axle snapped 2 days ago, and now it has Elric's job to help remove the splinters and replace the frame with fresh timber. The cows are fed, and the kindling has been gathered. Elric's hands are raw again, small cuts laced with dust and wood chips. His legs are heavy, his shoulders throb, but as he walks home through the amber glow of the setting sun, he feels something close to contentment. He breathes slowly, eyes blinking heavier now, and lets himself melt into the warmth and the stillness. Not joy, not excitement, but a kind of quiet satisfaction, like something ancient and invisible has seen his work and nodded in approval. He works alongside Tomas, a boy 2 years older who knows more about wheels and nails than Elric ever will. The heat warms his stomach like a coal nestled deep inside. After the meal, the family sits by the fire longer than usual. His father tells a story, an old folk tale about a boy who wandered too far into the woods and met a talking fox. The younger children listen wide-eyed, mouths slightly open, hands tucked beneath their chins. Elric knows the story already, but still enjoys hearing it. His father's voice is low and even, like the rhythm of a wheel turning on a smooth road. For a moment, the hard edges of the day are forgotten, replaced with the soft hush of storytelling and the flicker of firelight dancing on the walls. Tomas doesn't talk much, but he shows Elric the proper way to sand the edge smooth, how to check for balance, how to wedge a piece of cloth between two beams so the wood doesn't rub and squeak. Elric watches his hands, the way his fingers move with quiet precision, and thinks again about how many things there are in this world to learn, and how few hours there are to learn them in. Elric is set to the village green next, where he joins the other teenagers in gathering stones to reinforce the levee along the stream. It's tedious labor. The stones are heavy and cold, and the mud sucks at his feet, but it's shared work, and there's something comforting in doing it together. They move quietly, in sync, wiping the bowls, folding the cloths, banking the fire. She thanks him softly, pressing a hand to his shoulder before turning in. It's a rare gesture, not cold, not overly warm, just her way of saying she sees him, and that is enough. Beatrice is there again, her braids tucked under a wool scarf, sleeves rolled to her elbows, as she lifts one rock after another into the wheelbarrow. They exchange a few quiet words, not much, just observations about the weather, the way the clouds look heavy with snow. But it's enough. Their breath steams in the cold air as Elric leads them into the pen, tying their reins to the posts and kneeling beside the first one, his head pressed against her flank for warmth. The milk is slow today. He hums under his breath to keep the rhythm steady, an old tune he can't remember the words to. Just a melody passed down from someone who probably didn't remember the words either. The rhythm helps. The warmth helps. It's quiet work, but not unpleasant. Elric lies awake longer than usual, staring upward through a narrow crack in the thatch above him, his blanket pulled to his chin, the warmth of the fire brushing against one side of his face while the other remains chilled. He listens to the slow breaths of his siblings beside him, the occasional crack of the firewood, and the low moan of wind brushing against the cottage walls. He doesn't think in full sentences, just drifting thoughts, disconnected images, memories of the day, and fragments of imagined futures. Maybe one day he'll travel. Maybe he'll learn to write. Maybe he'll have a horse of his own. But even as he thinks it, he knows how far-fetched it sounds. In this life, most people die within a few miles of where they were born. Sleep comes eventually, heavy and dreamless, and the next morning begins before the sun can warm the earth. Once the pails are full and carried back to the cottage, he helps his mother strain the milk through a cloth into wide ceramic bowls. The afternoon is spent repairing a wooden cart that belongs to the baker. By dusk, the cart is fixed. The levee is lined with new stones. Supper that night is better than most. A stew made with leftover chicken, wild garlic, and the last of the dried lentils from the harvest. Later, after the younger ones are asleep, Elric helps his mother clean up. Elric lays down once more on the straw mat, blanket pulled tight, and watches the shadows flicker across the rafters. Outside, the wind shifts, and above it all the stars begin their slow turning again. Morning does not come with urgency. It arrives with mist, with the soft clink of a spoon against clay, with the cooing of doves nesting in the church tower above the village square. Elric opens his eyes to the dim, gray light creeping in through the shutter crack and lets the silence settle over him like a second blanket. His muscles ache, the kind of ache that never fully disappears, just shifts from one place to another. He moves slowly, sits up, rubs warmth into his arms before rising. The floor is cold. The air is still. Outside, the village is wrapped in fog, the outlines of fences and trees, soft as charcoal sketches blurred by time. Today is washing day, the kind of day where cold water and wet linen replace hammers and hay. Elric helps gather the laundry tunics and cloths, wool underlayers, and aprons stiff with work. He carries the baskets to the stream, where the water is dark and fast, and the stones beneath it as slick with moss. The women are already there, kneeling on flat rocks, sleeves rolled high, hands red with cold. They slap the cloth against the stones rhythmically, water spraying in arcs that sparkle in the weak morning light. Elric joins them, not because it's expected, but because he knows how much it helps. He takes a wooden paddle, dips the fabric, begins the motion fold, slap, twist, rinse, again and again. It numbs the fingers but quiets the mind. They hang the linens on ropes stretched between trees, the wind tugging at them gently like curious ghosts. Elric watches them sway as he wrings out the last cloth, his back sore, his sleeves soaked. He stands for a moment, letting the wind pass through his hair, the scent of wet earth and soaproot thick in the air. It's not glamorous, it's not exciting, but there's something satisfying about it, something clean and honest in watching a thing go from stained to pure again. In the afternoon he set to the abbey garden. The priest's assistant has fallen ill, and someone needs to help harvest the last of the winter vegetables before the frost comes. The garden is quiet, tucked behind high stone walls where rosemary and thyme grow wild beside old wooden beds lined with cabbages and leeks. Elric kneels in the soil, hands caked in mud, lifting each vegetable gently from the earth. The roots crack softly as they break free. Worms curl and hide from the light. A robin watches him from the wall, head cocked as if in silent judgment. The priest's apprentice brings him water and a small crust of bread. They sit together beneath a tree, sharing the meager meal. They talk for a while about nothing important. The color of the leaves this year, the shape of the frost on the window panes, the way the sun feels thinner now. It's rare to speak like this, without purpose or urgency. Elric treasures it, even if it lasts only a few minutes. By evening, the wind picks up. The clouds roll low over the village, dark and heavy. Everyone moves faster, gathering tools, herding animals, latching shutters. Elric helps his father move firewood into the lean-to, stacking it high against the stone wall. His arms strain, his legs tremble, but he doesn't stop. Not until the last piece is covered and the first drops of rain begin to fall. They eat inside that night, hunched close to the hearth. The storm rumbles beyond the walls, but inside it is warm, bright, safe. The fire dances, the rain hisses against the roof. Elric curls beside the flames, blanket wrapped tightly around him, his eyes growing heavier with every passing minute. His sister braids a doll out of straw. His brother pokes the coals with a stick, too sleepy to do much else. Their mother hums softly, that same old tune, again half lullaby, half prayer. Elric falls asleep to the sound of it, the wind rising, the flames crackling, the soft weight of a day's work behind him. And dreams, when they come, are soft and slow and kind. The storm passes sometime during the night, its thunder rolling away like a cart over distant hills. By morning the village is hushed beneath a soft fog and the scent of wet ash. That means no work in the fields, no carts to fix or fences to mend. The morning is for worship, and the afternoon is for rest. Elric dresses slowly, washing his face in cold water, running his fingers through his tangled hair. Children laugh and chase one another between the trees. The adults speak in quiet tones. Elric sits beneath a tree near the edge of the field, nibbling at a slice of barley loaf, watching the clouds shift overhead. Beatrice joins him without speaking. She sits with her back against the same tree, her knees drawn up beneath her dress, her hands wrapped around a piece of fruit. They sit in companionable silence, not needing words. But tonight there is nothing left to carry. Just the stillness, just the fire, just the stars turning outside, just two teenagers in a world that rarely makes room for softness. He pulls on his cleaner tunic, the one with the fewer holes, and ties a belt around his waist made of rough cord. She talks about her uncle, who once traveled to a city beyond the mountains. Elric returns home with a belly full of bread and a heart that feels a little lighter. He helps bring the goats in, checks the door latches, stirs the fire back to life. The wind has returned, but gentler this time, whispering through the trees like an old song. He sits by the hearth again, this time not from exhaustion, but habit. His mother is sewing, his father sharpening a blade, the younger children playing a quiet game with stones and twine. How he described the stone streets, the markets, the books. Elric listens, not responding at first. He can feel sleep pulling at him already, gently, steadily, like a tide. His body is tired, but not broken. His mind is full, but calm. And as he watches the firelight flicker across the walls, he lets himself drift, not into fantasy, not into escape, but into rest. But then he shares his own dream of maybe one day seeing the sea. He doesn't know where it is, only that it's far and wide and endless. She smiles, not in disbelief, but in recognition. She dreams, too, even if they don't speak of it often. There is no mirror, no comb, just habit and touch, and the faint memory of what he looked like the last time someone said he looked nice. Elric wakes slowly, blinking at the gray light seeping through the shutter. The hearth has gone cold. He sits up and listens, not for voices or shouting, but for the quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a night of wind and rain. It's a sacred quiet, a reverent one. Outside, the ground is slick, and puddles ripple gently as birds tiptoe along their edges. The sky is low and pale, like wool stretched thin across a frame. Today is different. It's a feast day, not a grand one with banners and music, but one of the small holy days marked on the church calendar. The chapel bell rings, its sound echoing softly between the cottages. Elric walks with his family down the narrow path that leads to the church, passing neighbors and familiar faces. Elric kneels on the worn wooden bench beside his brother, his hands folded, not in perfect devotion, but in quiet imitation. The priest chants softly in Latin. The words are foreign but familiar, like a lullaby in a language you once knew but forgot. Elric closes his eyes. The echo of the voices, the warmth of the candles, the stillness, it all begins to blur together, soft and drowsy. His thoughts drift. He imagines the saints in the stained glass watching him, not with judgment, but with tired understanding. Like they, too, know what it means to carry weight on young shoulders. The old woman who feeds the geese, the blacksmith's daughter with the burned scars on her arms, the twins who always walk in perfect step, heads bowed like monks. Everyone moves slowly today, solemnly, wrapped in wool and silence. It is not sadness they carry, but ritual, a shared rhythm passed down through generations. Inside, the chapel is cool and dark. Candles flicker from tall iron stands, and the scent of melted wax and old stone fills the air. After the service, the families gather in the green, where small fires have been lit for warmth, and pieces of bread and cheese are passed around. After a while, she speaks softly, almost too quiet to hear. Later, after the sun begins to sink again and the warmth of the day fades, Elric stretches out beside the fire, arms behind his head, eyes on the ceiling beams. Here, in this slow and ancient world, being a teenager means learning to carry things without dropping them. It means listening more than speaking, working more than dreaming. The days grow shorter now, and the sky begins to carry the low, heavy color of autumn. Morning mist lingers longer on the fields, clinging to fence posts and tree limbs like soft gray lace. When Elric rises each morning, he finds his breath visible, curling in quiet puffs as he pulls on his tunic and steps out into the dawn. His chores are the same, But the pace of the world is beginning to slow. The harvest has ended. The fields are resting. And soon the earth will harden again beneath frost and silence. One morning, Elric is sent with a small group of boys to gather firewood from the forest's edge. The task is familiar, but there's a new urgency now. Winter is near. The village needs wood for every hearth, every stew pot, every candle to burn through the dark. The boys carry axes and sacks, their breath puffing like smoke between them as they walk the old path into the trees. The forest is quiet, not still, but listening. Leaves crunch underfoot, brittle and curled, and the trees rise tall and bare above them, their limbs reaching like arms caught mid-gesture. Elric works steadily, collecting fallen branches, snapping dry limbs, and tying them into bundles with rough twine. The air smells of moss and ash. A raven circles above once, calling out with a voice that sounds far too human. The boys speak in murmurs, if at all. They know the forest holds stories older than the village, stories they're not meant to know. When the sacks are full and their backs sore, they return, stepping back into the open fields with a sense of quiet relief. The wood is stacked beside the cottage in neat rows, covered with straw and cloth to keep it dry. It's not enough yet. It never is. Elric rubs his hands together and watches his breath disappear into the air. Inside, the fire is lit early and kept low, the warmth clinging close to the stone hearth. The rest of the cottage stays cold. Blankets are shared, socks are patched. Sleep becomes a ritual of layers to tunics, a wool cap, and a blanket pulled tight to the chin. In the afternoons, Elric helps his mother prepare for the winter stores. They grind dried herbs into powders, twist garlic bulbs into ropes, and pack smoked meats into cloth-lined barrels. He watches her hands, how deftly they move, how sure they are. He wonders when his hands will move like that, if they ever will. She says little, but when she does, it is direct. Don't forget the salt. Wrap that tighter. No, not like that. Here, watch. He listens, he learns. It's a quiet education, but a lasting one. Sometimes, in the hour between chores and supper, Elric walks alone by the stream that runs near the chapel. It's narrow now, low from the dry season, but still flowing. He skips stones across its surface, watches the rings ripple outward, and tries to picture his life a year from now. 2 years, 10. He wonders if he'll still be here, if he'll be the one shouting at younger boys to fetch the kindling, if he'll marry, if he'll inherit the cottage, if the world will change. But these thoughts are like the stones he throws brief ripples on the surface of something too wide to cross. The evenings grow quieter. The fire burns longer. The conversations get shorter, punctuated by yawns and the rustle of fabric. Elric sharpens knives now without being asked. He checks the shutters before bed. He helps carry the smallest sibling to their place by the fire. No one told him to do these things. He just began doing them. That's how growing up works here. Not in sudden bursts, not in grand ceremonies, but in the slow assumption of quiet burdens. One night, after the fire has been banked and the wind rattles the shutters like a restless spirit, Elric finds himself unable to sleep. He lies awake, staring at the rafters, listening to the breathing around him. He slips from his blanket and steps outside, barefoot on the cold stone. The stars are out again, spread wide across the sky in unfamiliar constellations. There is no sound but the wind. He stands there a while, arms wrapped around himself. not thinking, not wishing, just existing, just breathing the air of his world. When he returns to his mat, the blanket feels warmer. The fire, though low, still glows. His brother turns over beside him and murmurs something lost in the haze of sleep. Elric closes his eyes and lets the rhythm of the night pull him downward again. Outside, the stars continue their slow spinning, and inside, the teenager sleeps, not as a boy, not quite yet a man, but as something quietly, patiently in between. The days now stretch with a kind of tiredness in them, as though even the sun has grown weary from its long summer watch. It rises later and sets earlier, leaving behind cold mornings and blue-shadowed evenings. Elric no longer fights the chill. He has learned to accept it like an old neighbor, always around, sometimes annoying, but part of life. The village breathes slower. The animals graze closer to their pens. Even the birds seem quieter. And Elric, though still young by any outside measure, is treated more and more like someone expected to carry weight without being asked. One morning the priest visits the cottage, not for a sermon, not for sickness, but to ask Elric to help with a copying task. A noble steward has passed through and left a letter something in Latin, formal, full of flourishes, and the priest needs help preparing a clean version to send back with the writer. Elric is not a scholar, but he can read a little now, thanks to long afternoons in the chapel when work was light and the priest was patient. He takes a seat at the small desk beneath the chapel window, the light cool and filtered through colored glass, and dips the quill slowly into ink. The parchment is rough, the words are strange, the work is delicate. Every stroke must be careful, precise, steady. He holds his breath with each letter, letting the rhythm of it settle into him like churning butter, or sanding wood, or weaving thread. There is peace in this too, not in movement, but in stillness. When the page is finished, the priest nods with something close to approval. Elric feels taller somehow, not because he's grown, but because he's been trusted with something fragile. On the way home, he stops at the well. The wind has picked up again, and it tosses the dry leaves along the path, like whispers from the trees. He ties his scarf tighter, the wool scratchy but familiar, and peers into the dark circle of water at the bottom of the well. His reflection looks back at him older than he remembers, his cheeks more hollow, his neck longer, his eyes quieter. He draws the bucket up, muscles straining, and pours the water into the waiting pail. The splash is sharp in the quiet air. By afternoon, he's helping prepare the cottage for deeper winter. Shutters are reinforced, cracks in the walls stuffed with moss and cloth. Extra straw is added beneath the mats where the family sleeps. His mother checks the salt stores and vinegar barrels. His father oils the iron tools and touches each one like an old friend. Elric moves between them, knowing what to do without needing to ask. The cottage becomes its own kind of ship-sealed, fortified, braced for the dark season ahead. Later, while gathering firewood near the edge of the trees, Elric finds a fallen nest empty, delicate, almost weightless in his palm. He holds it carefully, marveling at how something so small once held life inside it. He tucks it gently into a fold of his cloak and carries it home, placing it near the hearth as a small reminder of warmth in unlikely places. No one asks about it, but his mother doesn't move it either. That night, the family eats early. A thick soup of root vegetables and barley, with small pieces of smoked pork from the cellar. The fire is warm, the pot crackles as it boils, and the air is thick with the scent of thyme. After the bowls are emptied and the silence settles in, Elric's father pulls out a small wooden flute rarely used, a little chipped, and plays a slow, winding tune that fills the room like candlelight. No one speaks. The notes rise and fall like breath, like memory, like stories that don't need words. Elric closes his eyes and listens, letting the sound wrap around him like wool. When the fire dims and the family drift toward sleep, Elric lies on his mat and looks toward the ceiling, where the smoke has painted soft shadows. He thinks not of faraway cities or adventure, but of the sound of his father's flute, the weight of the nest in his hand, the feel of parchment beneath his fingers. Simple things, real things. And for once he feels no need to wish for more. He turns onto his side. His limbs are sore, but in a way that feels earned. His body rests, but his spirit stays still and steady, like the stars outside the shutter constant, unmoving, watching over a world that turns slowly, softly, night after night. The next morning arrives with frost, dusting the wooden sill, delicate as powdered sugar and just as quiet. Elric rises slowly, rubbing the warmth into his arms, and pulls his cloak around his shoulders before stepping outside. The ground crunches beneath his boots. The animals puff steam into the sky. Even the sun seems shy today, peeking weakly through the horizon like someone uncertain they are welcome. The whole world feels slower, softer. Every sound is hushed. This time he brings a lantern, the light flickering inside its glass. No footsteps echo, no dogs bark, just the creak of tree limbs and the faint whistle of wind. Somewhere nearby an owl calls low, steady, as if it's counting the hours of night. Just wind and fire and breath. Elric tilts his head back and lets the flakes touch his skin. They melt instantly, but leave behind a coolness that tingles. The flakes fall slowly, each one a silent miracle, and the village is transformed, roofs brushed in white, fences coated like lace, the path before him vanishing under softness. Earned. He places the lantern on the table and sheds his cloak near the fire, the edges stiff with snow. His mother presses a warm mug into his hand-spiced milk, rich and comforting, and he sits beside the flames, wrapping both hands around the cup. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The moment is full without words. The world is unfamiliar, but not frightening, just hushed, wrapped in a kind of ancient peace, as if winter itself has placed a blanket over the land and asked it to rest. The village is quieter in these weeks. Less laughter, fewer footsteps. The market square is almost empty now, with only a few traders wrapped in wool, selling dried goods and fire starters. Elric waits as the older villagers haggle in low voices. No one argues loudly in winter. They string them into garlands and hang them from the ceiling beams. Every inch of the cottage must be used. Every effort must serve the next. Later he cuts kindling into smaller pieces, careful not to let the blade slip. His hands are dry and cracked from the cold, but the rhythm of the work soothes him. One log, then another. Stack them near the hearth. Tuck away the splinters. Brush off the bark. The small rituals of preparation take on their own comfort. It's as if sound, too, must be rationed. When it's his turn, he trades a small bundle of dyed wool for a pouch of thick gray salt and a narrow flask of vinegar. The trader hands them over without words, just a nod, and Elric returns the nod in kind. That's how it is in the cold season. Fewer words, fewer smiles, but a deeper kind of understanding between people. Elric walks through the square with a basket strapped to his back, tasked with fetching salt and vinegar. He passes the stone well, now iced around its rim. The bread oven by the church is cold, smoke no longer rising from its chimney. Even the pigeons huddle close together on the chapel roof, their feathers puffed like cloaks. Inside the salt trader's tent, the air is thick with herbs and dried fish. Back home, Elric helps prepare the last of the onions for drying. That night, as the snow begins to fall, Elric steps outside once again. He walks a small circle around the cottage, listening to the way snow muffles every sound. When he returns indoors, the warmth feels deeper. And when he finally lies down again, the blanket tucked around his shoulders, he listens once more to the quiet of a medieval night. No hum of wires, no engines, no faraway horns. And that is enough. Winter settles in fully now, no longer knocking politely at the door, but pressing its weight against every wall, curling into every corner. The mornings are darker, the days shorter. The breath of the cottage fogs in the air long after the fire is lit. Elric awakens each day with the slow stiffness of someone who sleeps half-wrapped in cold. The straw beneath him is packed hard from weeks of use, and the wool blanket smells faintly of smoke and sweat. But he does not complain. No one does. Complaining serves no purpose when every soul around you is enduring the same invisible heaviness. Each day is marked by sameness, stoking the fire, feeding the animals, checking the roof for leaks where snow might drift in. The room is quiet now, save for the occasional snap of wood and the faint whistle of wind slipping through the walls. His family sleeps around him, breathing in unison like one great creature made of many hearts. And he lets the warmth of the hearth soak into him, lets his thoughts dissolve like snowflakes on his skin. But there is comfort in repetition, comfort in knowing what must be done and when. Their mother brews a tisane of elderflower and honey, wrapping the girl in every spare scrap of cloth in the home. Instead, he tends to the fire, reads a bit from the priest's borrowed book, and rests when he can. He wonders if other teenagers in other villages feel the same weight, the same tired ache in their bones. He wonders what it would be like to live somewhere warmer, somewhere where the fields don't die every year, and food isn't a game of counting and hoping. But such places exist only in stories, and he is no longer a child who believes that stories always come true. At one point he sits near his sister and hums softly a tune their mother used to sing when they were smaller. He doesn't remember the words, only the feeling. She doesn't open her eyes, but her breathing slows, steadies, and that's enough. Elric helps without being asked, fetching wood, warming stones to place at her feet, bringing snow in a pail to melt for steam. The fear is unspoken, but it hums in the air like a low note in a song. Everyone knows how sickness lingers in winter. Everyone knows how quickly a cough can become something worse. Elric's body knows before his thoughts do, hands reaching for the axe, fingers finding the bucket, boots stepping over the same warm threshold each morning. Time loses its sharp edges. The days blend, soft and indistinct, like fog rolling through the village square. One morning, his younger sister wakes coughing. Not a small cough, but the kind that curls deep in the chest. He does not leave the cottage that day. When night falls, he watches the snow drift past the shutter cracks, soft and slow and endless. As the fire dims, Elric curls beside it, knees pulled close, arms wrapped tight. Outside, the snow thickens. And inside, the teenager sleeps on braver than he knows, stronger than he feels, and softer than the world would ever let him admit. The village holds its breath through the deepest weeks of winter, as though speaking too loudly might invite more cold, more snow, more stillness. Elric moves through each day with a quiet that is settled deep inside him, the kind of quiet that only comes from long stretches of silence and labor. The rhythm of life has shrunk into the walls of the cottage, waking, tending, eating, sleeping. The world beyond the village may as well not exist. No travelers pass through now. No letters arrive. Even the priest speaks less during his sermons, as if conserving words the way they conserve firewood and flour. One morning, the frost is so thick on the shutters that Elric must chip at it with the back of a wooden spoon, just to see the dim light outside. The snowdrifts are nearly to his waist. The animals must be checked. The henhouse door is frozen shut, and he breathes hot air against the lock until it creaks open. The hens blink at him slowly, their feathers puffed up like old pillows. He scatters feed, freshens their water, and gathers what few eggs they've laid cold and smooth in his hand like tiny stones. His boots are stiff with frost when he returns, and his fingers burn as they warm again beside the fire. His mother presses a mug of something warm into his hand's water, and milk thickened with oats and a pinch of clove. He sips slowly, watching the steam curl into the air like a wandering spirit. No one speaks. Words are precious. Warmth is precious. Silence is survival. That night, the wind howls. Not a gentle whimper, but a full-throated cry that rattles the shutters and pushes cold air through every gap in the walls. Elric is awake long past the others, watching the shadows leap and dance across the ceiling. He imagines the wind as something, a live something with claws and a mouth and sharp teeth that try to find their way in. But the cottage holds. The fire holds. And Elric, though tired, does not fear. He knows the rules of this life now. He knows that stillness, not panic, is the answer. When the storm finally passes, it leaves behind a silence that feels even deeper than before. The snow is heavier now. The rooftops bow slightly under its weight, but the air is strangely soft, almost forgiving. That afternoon, Elric walks to the chapel, not for prayer, but simply to move, to breathe air that hasn't passed through lungs. And fire. The snow squeaks beneath his boots, and the sky is wide and pale and endless. He walks past trees bent with frost, past fences nearly buried, past doorways tucked beneath curled thatch. Everything is the same, yet covered, softened. Hidden dot inside the chapel. The air is colder than outside, but drier. The candles have long since burned low, and only a single oil lamp flickers at the altar. Elric sits near the back, alone, and stares at the stained glass window above. The colors are muted in the winter light, but the blues and reds still shine faintly. He doesn't pray. He doesn't ask. He just sits. The silence of the room wraps around him like a blanket not meant for warmth, but for peace. He thinks of Beatrice, though he hasn't seen her in days. Her cottage is at the far end of the village, past the crooked fence and the old alder tree. He wonders if she's warm, if her little brother is still sick, if she remembers the talk they shared beneath the tree, the story of the sea and faraway cities. He holds on to that thought like a coal in his pocket, something small, something glowing, something that helps him feel less alone. When he returns home, the fire is already going. The stew is bubbling. The little ones are asleep beneath the same blanket, heads resting close. His father is mending a strap. His mother is darning a hole. The rhythm continues, and Elric slips back into it like a page in a book he knows by heart. That night he dreams of walking along a snowy cliffside, the wind quiet, the stars low enough to touch. The first signs of the turning season are so subtle that only someone used to quiet living could notice them. Elric sees it first in the way the icicles drip by midday, their pointed tips softening into clear tears, then in the sound of water. Beneath the stream's frozen skin, just a gurgle, faint and slow, but there, alive. He notices the change in the way the birds return. Not many, but enough to lace the morning with chirps again. Life does not come back with fanfare here. It trickles, it whispers. It breathes before it sings. The cottage grows a little warmer each day, not because the fire burns hotter, but because the air outside no longer bites the same. Elric walks farther now past the well, beyond the chapel, along the muddy path that once disappeared beneath snow, but now re-emerges with patches of grass clinging to its edges. The ground is still hard, still stubborn, but it gives slightly beneath his feet, like a tired man stretching after a long sleep. He inhales deeply, the scent of earth returning, of wet bark, of things growing again just beneath the surface. His sister is well again. The cough faded as quietly as it arrived, leaving her pale and thinner, but smiling once more. She laughs at the way the goats nibble her hair, and Elric smiles, too grateful not in a loud or joyous way, but in the quiet relief of knowing what could have been and wasn't. He watches her carry a bucket almost too big for her and feels something stir in him, some mix of pride and protectiveness, like a brother, like a man. The priest visits again, this time with news. A merchant caravan will pass through the village soon. They've come from the south, bringing textiles, dried fruit, glass beads, maybe even spices. Elric's mother sets aside some eggs and a sack of dried turnips for trade. His father checks the iron tools. One of them may be worth swapping. Elric doesn't have anything of his own to trade, but he wonders what he might see, what strange words he might hear, what smells might fill the air that don't belong to this little place. When the caravan arrives, it is smaller than expected, but brighter. Fabrics dyed in colors Elric has never seen ripple in the wind, tied to poles and carts. One man speaks with a strange accent, clicking his tongue between words. Another has a bird on his shoulder that mimics everything said to it. Elric watches, from the edge of the green, wide-eyed, but quiet. He doesn't step forward. He doesn't speak. He simply watches, soaking it all in like sunlight after months of snow. One trader tells a story of a land with sand instead of snow, where people sleep during the day and rise when the stars come out. Another shows a tiny box filled with powders that sparkle like metal dust. Elric can't imagine the world being that big. He feels both small and full at the same time, like a seed planted too deep to sprout just yet. That night, the fire is bright, and the stew is rich with something new, a pinch of foreign spice traded for cloth. It stings the tongue slightly, unfamiliar and exciting. Elric savors each bite slowly, memorizing the taste. He doesn't know what it's called, but he knows he'll remember it forever. Later, When the cottage dims again and his family sleeps, Elric lies awake listening to the wind, not cruel now, but curious, the kind of wind that travels, the kind that carries stories on its back. He imagines tying a message to it, a wish, a thought, something like, "I'm here, I'm growing, I'm ready." And as he drifts off, he dreams not of faraway places, but of standing still, rooted while the world gently begins to move again around him. One evening, while returning from the stream with damp sleeves and sore arms, Elric hears singing. Not the low chants of the chapel or the nursery rhymes of younger siblings, but true singing, bright, clear, and careless. It's Beatrice. She's sitting on the old stone wall by the alder tree, hair unbraided, cheeks flushed from walking, feet swinging above the moss. She doesn't stop when she sees him. She just smiles and sings the rest of the verse. He stops to listen, leaning his weight on one hip, pretending not to be caught in it, but he is, entirely. When she finishes, they speak not of love or poetry, but of goats and mud, and how her father's cartwheel broke again. But still, something lingers in the space between their words, something gentle. Neither of them reaches for it. Not yet. They don't have to. In time it will step forward on its own. That night Elric carves a small piece of wood by firelight. Not for purpose, no handle, no tool, just a shape, a curled twist like a vine. He doesn't know why, only that his hands needed to make something, to shape beauty out of nothing. It sits on the windowsill now, watching the moon like a second set of eyes. Soon, the planting season will begin. The fields must be turned, the tools prepared, the seed counted and inspected. Elric watches his father inspect the spade, running a rough thumb along the metal edge. He listens to the plans being made where barley will go, where the beans should rest, what days will be best for digging. It's no longer just information to him, it's invitation. These are not things he's told. These are things he's now expected to know. He doesn't protest. He simply nods. The same way his father once did. The same way his father's father likely did, too. That evening, Beatrice passes by again, carrying a woven basket with torn edges and a woolen scarf trailing behind her. She doesn't stop, but she tosses him a crooked smile and says, "You'll get mud on your knees if you sit like that." And he laughs a real laugh, the first in days. Because it's true, and because it means she noticed Dot later, when the fire dims and the family stretches into sleep. Elric lies back and thinks of seeds, of how they sleep, quiet beneath the ground until the earth shifts just enough to let them rise. He feels like one now, not buried, not lost, just waiting, soft and still and full of everything that will come next. Outside, the stars blink gently like old friends staying up late to keep watch. And inside, the teenager dreams not of what the world is, but of what he might become in it. The wind has changed again, not sharp now, but fragrant, filled with hints of moss and pollen and the invisible dance of new growth. Trees begin to bloom in hesitant pinks and pale greens, as if unsure whether they are dreaming. The brook runs, faster, louder, laughing its way through old stones and new grasses. And with the season turning fully, so too does the rhythm of the village. Elric wakes now to bird song instead of silence, to light instead of frost. His muscles stretch differently. His steps move with a quiet sense of arrival. Each morning begins earlier. The tools once tucked away like animals in hibernation are pulled out again, inspected in the sun, their metal warmed in fire or breath. Elric helps clean them, the cloth leaving dark smudges on his fingers, the oil soaking into wood and iron. Alike, the first day of turning the soil arrives with more ceremony than words, just a nod from his father, a brief moment of stillness as the blade touches earth. Then the first cut, the first shift, the land groaning open like an old door finally unlocked. He pushes the plow beside his father. It's harder than it looks. His shoulders burn, and the handle bites into his palms. But the scent-rich, loamy, full of quiet life is reward enough. The crows follow behind, picking through unearthed worms, cawing like black-jacketed critics. The rhythm returns. Push, pull, breathe, repeat. He feels it in his spine, his thighs, his chest. It hurts, but it is the hurt that builds things. At midday, they eat bread and cheese beneath the edge of the field, backs against a crumbling stone wall. His father doesn't speak much, just grunts of approval when Elric offers water or passes a whetstone. But there's pride in the quiet, respect without announcement, and Elric absorbs it the way the soil absorbs the warmth of the sun, without needing explanation. That evening, Beatrice joins him on the path home. No invitation. She just falls into step beside him, matching his stride without effort. They talk of silly things, how her brother tried to chase a goose, how a cow wandered into the chapel yard. But something in their laughter has changed. It lingers longer. It's softer at the edges. She walks with one hand brushing the tops of the tall grass. He watches her from the corner of his eye and wonders if one day they'll share more than just words. At home, the cottage is filled with the smell of onions frying in oil and lentils simmering in a clay pot. His mother hums while she stirs. The sound is almost the same tune he heard from Beatrice days ago. Maybe it's old. Maybe it belongs to no one. Maybe it belongs to everyone. Elric sits on the stool by the hearth, boots off, socks steaming slightly. He doesn't speak, just lets the warmth soak into his legs, his hands, his chest. Later he climbs into bed with the window slightly cracked. The air is not cold now, just crisp, the kind of air that invites thought, that invites dreams. He watches the candle flicker one last time before it's pinched out. In the dark he listens to the house settle, to the rustling of straw and breath, and shifting limbs, and beneath it all the sound of spring waking up slowly outside his window. He does not feel like a child anymore, but he doesn't feel like a man either. He just feels ready. Promise. Elric wakes now not from cold or noise, but from the warmth of light slipping in beneath the wooden shutters, golden and soft across the floor. Outside, the fields have begun to green, not in wild bursts, but in careful patches. The wheat is only just sprouting, rows of short blades poking up like cautious fingers. Still, it's enough to stir something in his chest, something like hope, though he doesn't call it that. The days are long again. So long, in fact, that Elric sometimes forgets to mark the hours. He carries water, feeds the hens, sharpens the scythe, and then the light is still bright enough to begin again. His hands are blistered now in new places, his back sore in new ways, but these aches feel different from the winter aches. They are not from cold or stillness. They are from living, from growing, from doing something that matters, One morning, Beatrice's family visits to help with the new roof patch. The old thatch, heavy with snow damage, must be replaced before summer rains arrive. While the adults argue over rope and angles, Elric and Beatrice climb to the edge of the scaffolding. From there, the whole village feels smaller, like a map, like something held gently in a bowl of trees and sky. They don't say much. She points at clouds. He traces patterns in the dirt roads below. But their silence is thick with understanding. Comfortable, shared. Later, they sneak a small handful of dried cherries from her mother's apron saved for trading. Not snacking, but they eat them anyway. Slowly, reverently, letting the tartness bloom on their tongues like stolen treasure. They sit beneath the alder tree afterward, each of them with knees drawn to chests, looking out at the goats wandering just beyond the fence. He tells her he might try to make a wooden comb from the bone scraps they found. She says she might. Weave a pouch. Neither of them promises to give it to the other, but neither of them says they won't. The next few days are filled with the soft chaos of spring storms that roll in without warning, washing the sky in silver and thunder. Children, leaping barefoot through puddles. Hens laying more eggs than usual. The baker's chimney constantly puffing. Elric helps gather stones from the fields after the rain. They glisten like fish scales. The earth is heavy and thick underfoot, but his boots are strong now, and his stride confident. A boy who knows what each step is for. One evening, as the sun sinks like a gold coin, dropped gently into a bowl of milk, Elric's father calls him over. There's a boar in the woods. Not a big one, but one bold enough to scare the smaller animals near the stream. They'll track it tomorrow. His father wants him to come. Elric nods, not out of obedience, but out of readiness. This is no longer a boy being pulled along. This is a boy stepping forward. That night, the cottage is quiet again. No wind, no rain. Just firelight and slow breathing. Elric lies on his back, hands behind his head, eyes half-lidded as he listens to the coals pop and the old beams creak. He thinks of the forest, of the hunt, of Beatrice's laugh and the way she kicks water at the hens. He thinks of tools and paths and words unsaid. And somewhere between all those thoughts, he falls asleep, not as a child, not yet as a man, but as someone becoming. The morning of the hunt comes with a sky of pale blue and air that carries the scent of damp bark and moss. Elric dresses in layers, pulls his boots tight, and knots the belt around his tunic with fingers that no longer tremble from cold or doubt. His father waits at the door with a hand axe and a nod. No grand speeches, no advice. Just the quiet trust passed between men who have worked beside each other long enough to know words aren't always needed. They leave before the sun has risen high, their silhouettes swallowed by the tree line. Like ghosts returning to old stories, the forest breathes differently than the fields. It is deeper here, older. Each footstep is absorbed into the soft earth, muffled by leaves and fallen needles. Birds call overhead, but do not sing. The world is alert, listening. Elric keeps close, watching the signs, broken branches, fresh tracks, the curve of disturbed mud near the stream. It feels like following a secret, like reading a language older than anything ever carved in stone. Hours pass, slowly, quietly. Then a movement, a flash of brown muscle through the ferns. His father's hand presses to his shoulder, and they crouch, hearts beating in time with the wind. The boar is younger than expected, its tusks small, but its eyes wary. When the moment comes, Elric doesn't hesitate. He steps forward, breath steady, hand firm. The spear finds its mark, swift and clean, and the woods fall silent in approval. Not celebration, just recognition. A rite past, a thread tied in the great web of the villages. Memory dot, they carry the animal home together, slow and careful. The weight is heavy, but it's shared. Back in the village, no one cheers, but heads nod, and eyes linger on Elric just a little longer than usual. He feels it not fame, not glory, but something older and deeper. The quiet entry into the circle of those who provide, who protect, who carry more than just their share of wood and water. That night, the boar is prepared over the fire. The smell fills the cottage, thick and rich. Neighbors pass through briefly to offer salt, to taste, to listen. Beatrice sits near the door, holding her little brother in her lap. Elric doesn't speak much, but he catches her eye once. She raises her mug. He mirrors her, a toast with no words, just understanding. Later, when the fire burns down to glowing coals and the village settles into its familiar hum of sleep, Elric steps outside. The stars are out sharp and close, like silver seeds thrown across black velvet. The moon is full and watching. The earth beneath his feet is no longer frozen. It welcomes his steps now, not as a stranger, but as someone who belongs. He closes his eyes and listens to the leaves, to the faint ripple of water, to the creak of the fence as the wind touches it. The world is bigger than he'd imagined, but not too big. Not anymore. It's no longer something to dream of escaping, but something to be part of, to grow inside. He returns to the cottage and crawls beneath the blanket, muscles sore, heart full. Sleep finds him quickly, easily, like an old friend, and in that quiet, gentle place between firelight and dreaming, between who he was and who he is becoming, the teenager, once unsure and waiting, simply rests. He has done enough for today. And tomorrow will come with light and mud and laughter and something new. But for now, you are warm, you are safe, and the night is yours. Good night.